Iris, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. How are you doing in the run up to the preparation for the show?
Yeah, it's very strange because normally we are in Paris and it feels like the whole family is coming together. That's a bit different, but it's going well, and it's a little less stressful than usually, which is good. I think we're pretty. We have everything nice under control, and I'm excited to share the new work with people. Yeah.
What was it? You say it's a little bit less stressful, but for these last few months in confinement, what was it like for you not knowing if there would be a show or there would be a show? And what was that experience like for you to live through the confinement?
Yeah, the last few months have been very different than how I feel now. Now it feels creative again, and we are able to collaborate together also with people outside of the studio. Even though it's digital, it feels like the creative process is alive again. And in the lockdown, it was difficult, to be honest, because so much of the craftsmanship and the work is so based on collaboration and being together and sharing knowledge and sprouting of ideas, like bouncing of ideas together, and all that interaction wasn't there. So yeah, it has been a very different process, and obviously we weren't sure whether there even would be a digital fashion week. Um, so it was all very unsure and quite hectic mentally as well. So it feels more focused and more creative right now.
That's interesting because I've talked with other designers who felt like that when they were in confinement and by themselves, that they found that to be a very creative moment where they were able to sit back and process. But for you, actually not having that collaboration was a challenge.
Yeah, my work is very focused on collaboration. It's a very collaborative process, so I think it is a little different because I don't sit down on my own and sketch, for example. It's growing out of experiments and experiments with a team of people. So we started with the materials, and we couldn't even order materials because all the companies we collaborate with were closed as well. So I guess for the complexity and the layering within my work, it might have been a bit more challenging even.
Well, then let's talk a little bit about that. How did you have to adjust your original idea and concept in relationship to the fact of not having access to the product or the materials that you usually work with? Did you have to throw everything out and start afresh, or did you build off the foundation and create something completely different?
Um, a little bit of both because we take 6 months for creating a collection. So by the time this was all happening and we were realizing it will be different, we already started up a little bit of a collection, but obviously, not developed enough. So little sprouts of ideas were already developed and little material experiments were already done, which we revised then, when we knew the fashion week was still happening. Yeah.
When you realized that the fashion week was going to be happening, but there wouldn't be a physical one, that there wasn't in the cards for the future, how did you envision how you were going to present your collection in this new digital format? I mean, granted, of all the couturiers, you were the most avant-garde and forward-thinking, but even you had to rethink the whole presentation. So talk to me a little bit about that process and what you came up with.
Well, interestingly, my work is very based on a conceptual level as well, which is sometimes abstract to express to people during a traditional setting of a one-way show. So I felt I had a little bit more space for that in this season because there wasn't going to be a traditional fashion show, so I felt I could go a little bit deeper into the conceptual side of my work and to express that within a visual language. So we focus not only on the garment itself, but also on the film project that is collaborative again. So it felt important to collaborate with people that inspire me, but also to be able to tell a conceptual story that is often so much of a guidance in all of my work. I felt I had a little bit more freedom on that side in this, so that's why we put a lot of effort also in creating the film project.
Okay. So it sounds
Yeah.
like the highlight, or the best part of the confinement or going digital was this freedom that you were able to express and to go a little bit more, in deep on something more creative points. What was the biggest challenge for you then, would you say, other than not having the materials that we talked about? What else kind of you had difficulty with, would you say?
I think the process of uh, technique development. When I start on a collection, I never know what the outcome will be, because the process is very chaotic and very interactive and very layered. So that whole level of experimentation, that was very limited. We always call it an evolution of craftsmanship, where one person starts something and then another idea grows on top of that and another idea grows on top of that, and it's very communal. It's really people, creative people in the studio all working together. And you would imagine that is still happening throughout Skype, but it isn't really. The craftsmanship and even the other techniques that we are depending on with companies we work with, like the laser cutting or the molding or even 3D printing, everything was shut. So there was a lot of limitation on the technique side, but luckily that was in the lockdown, but the last weeks have been a lot more open in the Netherlands and around, so we were able to do a bit more in the last sprint, I would say.
So it's interesting to have yourself stretch creatively in a way that you never thought you would have to. That's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
You touched on this a little bit, but I did want to ask you, so much of what you do is collaborative, like you said, or you're inspired by a fabric or new technology. But I wanted to know, maybe it's different for each collection, but is it a concept in your mind first, then you go and look for the tech that can work for the concept in your mind, or is there tech that sparks you and then you create something out of it?
It's a little bit of both. I've had it often that a material itself is the inspiration in its purity, then it just starts evolving in my mind into shape and texture, or a technique that is so alien or like far away from what I know, that I just feel drawn to it and I feel that I want to experiment with it. But it can also often come from a more traditional point of view, where I see an artwork of someone, or I read a beautiful article about something, or I have a conversation with someone, and that sparks into a concept, and that sparks into a translation within a detail or a texture. So it actually is really both ways. Yeah.
I know you get asked this question a lot, but I absolutely want to ask it. Do you think the couture fashion is art or is it fashion? Where do you place it in the world?
I place it equal. I feel couture is a very beautiful expression of fashion and art at the same time. I don't want to separate the two, and I guess that's similar to how I don't really like boxing disciplines. I feel fashion and couture are ultimately an expression of who we are and who we want to become, and are an expression of our values and also the world around us. So I just cannot separate fashion from art, because they are too interlinked together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I see fashion as very much, or couture as very much the dream factory of fashion, the
exactly.
overarching industry of fashion. Um,
Yeah.
do you feel like, um, when you're, what you do is considered to be very avant-garde, you really push the envelope of what couture is. Do you feel the pressure to pull couture, which is such a traditional and old school way of designing clothing, into a new area? Do you feel like a lot of pressure to be the one leading the way?
Um, I don't think I experience it as a pressure personally. I think it's more a fascination for me. That when I look back at couture, it's an incredible evolution of innovation. Actually, a lot of people nowadays think of couture um, as tradition only within craftsmanship. But if you look at the evolution of craftsmanship, it's all a sequence of of innovation actually. So I feel I just want to add to that beautiful evolution of innovation, and craftsmanship has always been evolving. It would be really strange if we suddenly come and live in a time where craftsmanship stops and stays where it's basically left off a century ago. So I just feel part of a sequence within time. I don't really actually feel I'm doing something very different than people did like 100 years ago. I just reflect the time that we live in, and I feel it's important to keep couture yeah, important still.
Alive.
In this,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
always love talking to you and hearing what is exciting you right now, because you're always, experimenting in lots of different fields on lots of different tech. And so I'm wondering, is there a particular fabric or particular technique or avant-garde way of, I don't know, melding fabrics together that you're really excited about? Because you always, entice me with your latest, discoveries.
yeah. It's interesting because we are starting, or actually we have been working on that for a little bit now, on the next collection. So after this presentation, and like I said before, a lot of experimentation is done in the beginning, and at this point of time, and I love that point of time, I have no idea which of those experiments and tests are actually gonna be failures and which ones are gonna turn out the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I really do not know yet which techniques and materials will end up in the next collection. So it's a little bit too early to really give a good answer to it.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a lot of new progress being made, and I think some of it will really be um, like a complete new challenge for the atelier,
For
which
the
I'm really
next
excited
the
about.
next season. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
it's
then,
too early. Yeah.
sorry. So then, talk to me about this season. What is Is there something in particular about this collection, this movie that we'll be seeing? Uh, what did you want to evoke through it? What did you want to communicate? Because again, there isn't that theater experience of being in the room with you and watching it. So, what did you want to express in this new format of digital presentation?
Yeah, well, there's a few things. It was important to me, obviously, to reflect on the last months and the experience we had. And it felt, obviously, I guess, for all of us as a moment of rebirth and regrowth. So that element of growth is very apparent in the film. It's a reflection on the nature of perception, inspired by a Dutch artist called Escher. You might know him. I wanted to stay close to home in a way. It's also inspired by a Dutch collaborator that I'm not sure if we can reveal already. When will this come out?
You know what? We'll keep that one. We'll say "mum's the word" on that, because I honestly don't know if this is going to go about before or after we see your video. So let's keep it a secret, and we can talk about it later.
Yeah, that's a good one. Now there's a very precious collaboration in this project that is also close to home. which I'm very excited about. So it's really celebrating, uh, yeah, a community of collaboration that is close to us, and obviously the aspect of nature is very prominent in this as well. Um, the design is very focused on showing an evolution of growth, very literally actually, and I think it will make sense when you see it.
I can't wait to see it. Another question I wanted to ask you, granted couture is it's hard as in Paris. I mean, that's where its roots are. But you could show anywhere. I mean, your collection, you could show it anywhere, and particularly now everything is in flux about where brands show and when they show. But why showing in Paris for you? What was it about Paris that you felt like this is where I want to present my collection?
Well, it's interesting what you just described. It really feels to me like that. Paris always feels home to me for my work. Perhaps because of the history and what has grown there within couture. It feels precious for me to be part of that special place in this time. I'm known for innovation, but I very much appreciate tradition as well. And I think it's a beautiful ritual that has been happening for such a long time in such a beautiful place as well. I always feel inspired in Paris as well. Like the art that is around me, I think really boosts me to create again. So for me, it's a perfect moment of celebration to show my work there. I know it can always change, but I do like that ritual that we're having. Yeah.
Looking forward, again, things are still in flux. We don't know where we're going, what's up next. What would you like to see happen? Where would you like to see us when the next shows are happening, 6 months time from now? Where would you like us all to be?
Well, there is a certain magic to a physical fashion show. So I definitely think and hope we'll have our next show in Paris for the next couture again. And I wouldn't want to replace that for anything else. I do. We are also working on a virtual reality experience of new work that we are doing. And I think that's a beautiful addition to a fashion show, because one of the hard parts to me is that obviously my work is very focused on three-dimensionality and texture and detail, and most people are not able to see my physical fashion show, and they see my work on a small screen, which is ultimately two-dimensional. So I do want to move into a wider context, into showing the real preciousness of the work in its full three-dimensionality, ideally in its full scale, to a much wider audience. So, and I think virtual reality can really bring people a lot closer to that three-dimensional experience, and also to experience my work in its full
all its glory.
Yeah, so I'm very excited actually that we can do both, and that's also what I hope to keep on doing, to focus on how can we bring the work closer to much more people, into a more emotional relationship than the iPhone or the phone that we have. I think so much more will be possible in the future. And at the same time, I love tradition, and nothing can beat the magic and the emotion of a physical fashion show. So I want to absolutely keep on doing that as well. Yeah.
Iris, I will go to any fashion show you put on, virtual, real life, wherever. I will be there. Thank you so much for taking the time, for speaking with me. And I really look forward to seeing what you've come up with this season for the couture collections.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.